And welcome to another episode of Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle with your host, Noor Kyle, who cannot speak tonight. Tap on your microphone, Noor. Or something. There. That's Noor. She's taken a vow of silence, so you will not hear from her tonight, but you will see her in the chat. And me, Mushtaq Ali, your other host. And we are coming to you from beautiful downtown planet Earth with special guests tonight of all sorts of people who you may or may not know and who I am not going to introduce because it's more fun to be surprised. So tonight, the subject is the third eye. What the heck is it? And why would we want one? And what would we do with it if we had one? And if it opened up, what would you get? So I remember the first time I knew anything about the third eye, there was this book by that name, The Third Eye, by a guy who went by the name of Tuesday Lobsang Rampa, who claimed to be a Tibetan monk. And then he claimed to be an Englishman whose body was taken over by a Tibetan monk. And then he claimed to be a talking cat. And he claimed various other things. He was really a crazy dude. But for the first book, I actually thought he was for real. And he talked about the opening of the third eye and how all of a sudden he got all of these mystical powers. And then I found other books on the subject because I was very disheartened when I got to book 3 or something and found out that his claim to be a Tibetan monk was entirely bullshit. And that he was some English guy who maybe had a little bit too much to drink or smoke. But so I found other books, and they all talked about seeing auras and all of this kind of stuff. And I always wanted to see auras. And then I realized that if I wanted to see auras, all I needed was some mushrooms, and there were all the auras in the world. So all of a sudden, auras lost their glow. So there is a thing with the pineal gland that, the pineal gland is a little gland in your head, sort of, you go straight in that way halfway and it's kind of there. And for some reason, it has an optic nerve and it goes to your, the optic centers of your brain in the back of your head. And some frogs and lizards have a pineal gland that is actually an eye, a third eye in their head. So the third eye thing actually turns out to be sort of kind of real in that sense, but that's not what we're talking about. We are not talking about the pineal gland tonight. We are not talking about seeing auras. We are not talking about having clairvoyance. We are not talking about astral projecting or seeing into the future or any of these fun things that you can find anywhere on the interwebs that you are interested in. What we're going to talk about tonight is something totally different, which is the real third eye and what it's for and how to use it. So, you have heard me and various other people who are of like persuasion say that man is third force blind. That literally means you can't see the third force. And y'all know the third force. You have the affirming force, the denying force, and then the third force, the reconciling force. So the yin, the yang, and the yao, I like to call them. Most of the time, we are stuck in binaries. Yes or no, black or white, forward or back, up or down, right or left. And we never see the other possibilities. The real third eye is the one that sees the next possibility, that sees beyond the binary into the other choices. How many other choices are there between yes or no?
Infinite?
Yes. There is an infinite number of maybes in between those two. Yeah, and we have, for instance, we have the idea of the sexual binary, which was the norm for the longest time until medical science discovered that there were not, in fact, two genders, but there's an entire spectrum of genderness, let alone gender identityness, which are gender and gender identity are separate, sort of. They don't actually completely go together. So that in itself, it doesn't fit the binary. And yet, not only do we not see this, but when we are forced to experience something outside of the binary, it tends to make us a little crazy. Have you noticed that? Humans tend to be most comfortable when you have a nice us and them going. And if we ran out of them, we would have to create more them from us, which we have been known to do on more than one occasion. So how does this sound so far? Do I sound completely and utterly insane? If not, I'm not trying hard enough. By the way, Aisha, just so you know, this is not one of these things where you've heard me talk before. I don't just sit and lecture at you. This is a discussion. This is a sohbet. This is us all talking. There are no sheikhs here, just dervishes.
I will keep that in mind.
So anytime you want to chime in with a thought, an idea, a question, or an answer, because believe it or not, I don't have all the answers. So sometimes I need a little help. Feel free to jump in.
Thank you.
So opening the third eye is opening yourself to seeing the possibilities outside of the binary. When would this be useful, besides always? Mustaqim, salam alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Good to see you. Sounds like you've got a party going on there.
I'm in the office actually.
Yeah, we may have to kill your microphone just to not pick all of that up on the recording. So tonight we're talking about the third eye in a completely different way, not the mystical seeing visions and auras and all of that kind of stuff. We're talking about the third eye as a way of seeing possibilities beyond the yes and the no, to being able to see the third force, the reconciling force, it acting in the world. And so I'm going to give you the first exercise I was ever given that begins to do this. And it works like this. When you find yourself with a binary problem, I think I either have to do this or I have to do that, then you must immediately find a third possibility that you could do. So I either need to go to school or get a job. And yet I find that both of these ideas give me a certain amount of anxiety. And that means I'm not seeing the third force. So what else could I do besides going to school or getting a job? I could, what could I do? What are your suggestions? What can you do besides going to school or getting a job?
Start your own business.
You could start your own business, yes.
An internship that'll give you experience in the field you're trying to break into.
Yes. What else?
Both.
Start an Etsy store.
Yeah. That's kind of the same as starting a business.
Sure. But one is with your own craft and the other one.
Yes. Yes, you could actually do both, go to school and get a job.
Worked for me.
Walden, yes. Go off and live in the woods for a year and write. You could come back with a book that is much beloved after that. For those of you who don't get the reference to Walden, and maybe somebody wouldn't, that is the pond, the name of the pond that Henry David Thoreau went and lived by all by himself in the woods. And then he wrote the book Walden, which was all of his reflections while living there, which is a profound piece of work. It is a major work of the American Enlightenment. And, you know, Thoreau may have been a Buddha. He would get my vote. Though I think Emerson might be a little bit more profound, and Whitman even more so. Did you know that Walt Whitman was a Sufi? This is a bit of history they don't teach you in school. If you don't believe me, find a copy of Leaves of Grass and look towards the end of it for a poem called The Persian Lesson and read it. So, Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass, The Persian Lesson. And then ask yourself, why would somebody at the end of the Civil War write that poem? As far as I know, it was the first reference to Sufism within the United States. So, be a scammer. Not recommended, but possible. Yeah, that's true.
Be a scammer.
Yeah, as you are looking for things beyond the binary, you're going to find an entire spectrum of negative things as well as the positive ones. Yeah, next week we're going to actually talk a little bit about scamming and manipulation within spiritual groups, just because it's a topic that comes up and it's one that is near and dear to my heart. Not as something that I want to do, but as something that I want to prevent people from having done to them. And it's worth thinking about every now and again, but we will come back to that. So, the very first exercise in opening the third eye is to look for a third choice. Anytime you get an either or choice, you start training yourself to look for a third one. Do I want milk or cookies? No, I have ice cream. Do I want to go out to eat or do I want to eat in? No, I think I'll fast tonight. After a while, this will become much more natural. It will make people a little crazy around you because people are most comfortable with either or choices as a rule. And if you go outside of that model, you will tend to upset a certain number of your friends.
One more thing from Qigong
Yes.
is appreciating that moment when one choice shifts into the other one. I've been told it's a very important moment, but I have not been able to pay attention to it adequately.
Yeah, that's a definite possibility. So the point of shifting between the yes and the no. I forget who it was who said, the universe also contains a maybe. So, first step, begin to see more than two choices. The second step, begin to sense the reconciling force in action in the world by how? Most of you went through the 3 forces and 6 processes course. How do you begin to sense the reconciling force in the world? Don't everybody answer at once. Zainab, you were there the whole time. Now, I did not pick on Zainab at random. I chose to pick on her, and I'm picking on you. I totally admit that, because you're an artist. And artists are one of the few groups of people who have more of a natural sense of the reconciling in process. Because great art always has a bit of the reconciling forces in it. So, what do you think? And Zainab says, breath. Okay, this is an important question for you. I see that you have changed your name on this. Finally, I noticed this thing. Do you prefer to be called ZZ these days? No? Okay. Yeah, I'm actually very fond of the name Zainab, so I will tend to call you that without thinking. It's a good name. Ah, well, I'm old, but I probably ain't your grandma, so. So, seeing the third force. The reconciling force is the force that holds the affirming and denying together in a kind of unity. If you remember from the various other talks that I've given, I give you the example of the atom. The affirming and denying you find in the hydrogen atom. 1 proton, 1 electron. The electron is spinning around the proton, and they are in balance. The proton and the electron are attracted together and pulling themselves towards each other, but they don't get there because the centripetal force of the spinning electron keeps it in balance and keeps it in its orbit, more or less. And basic high school physics. It's a lot more complicated than that, and we don't need to go into that right now. But to make anything more complicated than a hydrogen atom, something needs to happen, because like charges repel. So you put 2 protons together next to each other, and they're going to go flying to opposite sides of the universe. It might take a while, but they would eventually get there, because they don't like each other.
So in this example, what's the reunifying force?
The
Neutron?
unifying force is what we call the neutron. In the nucleus of an atom, for every proton, there is also a neutron, which is neutrally charged, and it's what allows the positively charged particles to hang out together without exploding all over the known universe. And that is the third force. So you get the next atom up from hydrogen is helium, and it is 2 protons, 2 neutrons, and 4 electrons. And there's your balance there. And then it keeps adding like that. If you want a stable element, you have to have an equal number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus of the atom to keep everything from blowing apart. And the neutron represents the neutral force. It represents the reconciling force. It allows two things that are alike to exist together. So, starting with that as an example, what are some other examples of the reconciling force? How about you have a couple, a husband and wife, and they are not working out together for some reason, and you get a therapist, a couples counselor. The couples counselor becomes the reconciling force between the husband and wife. Yes, simple, easy, not even hard to see.
Might courtesy be a reconciling force?
Courtesy can definitely be a reconciling force. Courtesy has saved any number of lives in the history of the world.
It might be something that we seem to be lacking today.
Say again?
I said it seems like it's something we're lacking today.
Oh yes, we are, definitely. Yeah, people used to be a lot politer when they were in arm's length of each other. At least that's my memory of it, because you always knew that if you were too rude, somebody would probably hold you accountable for your words.
This year I went up to the small town in northern Idaho where I was raised, and I always dread going back there because I feel like such a pariah there. And I was at the Renaissance Fair and I met two other folks. I was talking to my husband in Egyptian on the phone, and I hung up the phone and I heard people speaking Egyptian behind me. So I started to talk to them and I asked them what they thought of this tiny town. And they said that it was the place that they'd experienced the least amount of discrimination. Not in a big town, they always would get harassed or they would feel like people would stare at them. But in a small town, everyone was respectful and kind because everyone knew each other.
Uh-huh.
And I hadn't really thought of that, of small towns, you know, because I'd just been thinking of the lack of diversity, even though that town has like a university and the only mosque in northern Idaho or whatever. I still don't think of it as being a place I'm comfortable sticking out. But it turned out because it was a small town, folks had to be polite.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point of view, because that goes to the you're accountable for your words in a small town because everybody knows what you said.
Yeah. And it made me realize the places that I'd been harassed the most were places like Santa Cruz and Portland.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to think of being harassed in Santa Cruz, but boy, I've seen that more than once.
Yeah. For a town we think is really progressive, trans and non-binary folks sure seem to get a hard time here.
So, other ways to begin to sense the third force. The next way that is recommended is to learn to sense it in your own movements. And you may remember, Aisha, that I used to talk about this in Silat class all the time. I talked about the three forces in how you related to an attack. You know, meeting the affirming force with the denying force, meeting the denying force with the affirming force, and using the reconciling force to neutralize the situation. In Silat, the reconciling force is where the person goes flying through the air and lands painfully on the ground, striking 3 or 4 times before they finally come to a stop. All on their own power because somebody redirected their energy in an interesting force vector.
That's practically the way that I define Silat.
And Nancy has asked, what would the reconciling force between remembering and forgetting be? And that's a darn good question. I think the reconciling force is imagining in that case. And Zainab asks, watching myself when drawing is difficult. Could that be reconciling? Maybe. I actually have never tried to watch myself while doing art in the sense of standing outside myself and doing it. I'm much more, for me, the reconciling force in art is when I find the flow. The flow state where everything is just happening and I am witnessing rather than anything else. It's like it is happening without my conscious intervention. I'm not thinking, oh, should I put a line there, or maybe this color needs to be darker, or should this be more three-dimensional? It's doing its thing. My hands are moving things around. The image is emerging, and I'm witnessing rather than watching. So, third exercise. Yeah, when you hear those little dings, that's Kyle prompting me to stop wandering around in my thoughts and stay on task, which is definitely part of her job. And without which this talk would be much, much weirder, trust me. So, the third exercise is to experience this in movement, to find the reconciling force in the movement of your own body. So you can think of it as moving towards something, moving away from something, and moving against something. So towards is this. Away from is this. And against is that. Do you get a feel for the difference between those three? When we move against, the vectors change, the energy changes. The energy is neither denied, as in the second example, when it's moving like this and you just move with it like that. It's not crashed into, it's not affirmed, it's like, I'm here. It is touching and changing. It's much easier to experience this with more than one person or with a person in an environment that can change. So, how do you open a door with the affirming force? You push it open or you pull it open. How do you open a door with the denying force? Tell me, how do you open a door with the denying force?
Wait for it to open. Someone else to push it open.
Yeah, that could be. Somebody comes in, begins to open the door, and you catch it and pull it. Noor suggests air pressure change. Yes. That's an excellent example. And then, how do you open up a door with the reconciling force? Dave, how would you do that?
Maybe slide it open.
That could be. Or you could call your daughter. Think about that.
That would be neutralizing because she wouldn't open it for me.
Oh, you don't ask her to open it. No. You go, hey, kid, you want a treat?
I have used this trick upon occasion, yes.
Yeah. So there is a small example of that. And then we get to the fourth exercise, which is using it in human interactions. Usually, I would have Noor and myself do a little role playing so you could see it happening, but she can't talk, and I am kind of halfway suspicious that she lost her voice so that she could get out of this. And there's that big grin. But so in human interactions, you usually have a binary setup, or you have two of each. So what are two affirming forces? Give me an example of two affirming forces.
A car that goes along when you press the gas pedal.
Yeah, I want people though.
Humans. Cheerleaders encourage you as affirming what the football team is doing.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Think two people. Think you and I are talking. And, well, we can go back to the conversation we were having earlier. Boy, I really liked Pergolesi's coffee shop.
Yeah, it was the best. Continuing a conversation in this way that's like affirming what the other person says. Like
Yes.
improv.
Yeah, but there is no conflict in that. You know, we are both in agreement that Pergolesi's was the best coffee shop in Santa Cruz. And in my time, it definitely was. I have such fond memories of that place. But we won't go into that now because that is all past. Mother Nature and the forces of humanity have wiped Pergolesi's from the face of the earth. So, what would be an example of two denying? And it's not, I hate this too. That's not that, that's still affirming.
When my mother and I talk politics, like we always disagree, that's why we can't.
Yeah.
Politics.
That would be a good example. I like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an asshole. You're an asshole. That thing, yes. So the affirming and denying forces, when they come together, often look like an argument. Or often, the denying forces, when they come together, often look like an argument. You're wrong. No, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. And we all know what affirming and denying look like. I love broccoli. Broccoli is terrible. I love broccoli. Broccoli is terrible. It's different than a political argument where both of you are hating on the other. It's a slightly different effect. And then we get to the reconciling force. What's the reconciling force? What would the reconciling force look like?
that sort of partner conversation where you say, I hear you saying that when I show up late, that really puts you in a tight spot, and I'll do better to care about what you care about. Someone trying to reconcile sort of opposing forces. Or...
That's a pretty good start. And it can actually go in a little bit deeper than that. Dave says, people working together to figure out a puzzle. And that is, in some ways, an even better example. But if you could take those two things, people listening to each other and people working together to solve a mutual problem, that's getting even closer. But the reconciling force actually has to reconcile. It has to create a higher order in order to be truly reconciling. So what would the higher order be? Let's take the example of I'm going to meet Noor somewhere and I'm a half an hour late. And she says, you're a half an hour late. And that really hurt my feelings. And I go, you know, I'm a half an hour late. And I understand that your feelings are hurt by that. And I feel terrible. That has not gotten to the reconciling yet. So what is the reconciling? Yes. Cheesecake is in fact reconciling. Empathy is important. Yes, empathy is part of this. You know how I harp on the whole empathy and conscience thing. Over and over again, ad nauseum, I keep talking about this because it may actually be important. Cheesecake is also important. But that's the next, Nora's is not as being as facetious as you think. My next question would have to be, what can I do to change myself to make our interactions better? How can I change my behavior in the future so that you will be more comfortable meeting me and I will be more, what's the word I want? This is why it's so frustrating when you get laryngitis, because you know all the words I want and you can't tell me.
Timely, considerate.
Not quite. It'll come to me. It's probably not an English word for it. So it is the act of, well, and that's the thing, is it is the taking action. Because going, oh no, I did this, I'm a terrible person, is not taking an action to make it better. And the reconciling force takes action. It is behavioral in nature.
Like Grandma Sharp said, if you're sorry, don't do it again.
Yep. It's nice having you here, Aisha. It's like you've never been gone.
Same. Thank you for telling me about this.
Yeah. So, the idea of reconciling through action, of an actual behavioral change within an interaction that takes the yes and the no and brings it up to a higher order, is what we're looking for. And in an hour-long talk, I can only give you the most vague references to this, and I know that this is vague, and I encourage you all to talk about this on the forum and all of these other things so that we can bring it out more, because this is important. Yes, actions against entropy. We like that. We are agents of chaos and the enemy of entropy. We need to get a little international no sign with a big E in it.
Mm.
So does this sort of make sense to everybody? Kind of a little bit, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the basic introduction to the opening of the third eye. The third eye is not seeing auras. The third eye is seeing the reconciling force in the world and bringing it into reality, bringing it into action, making it fruitful. When you can manifest the third force in your life changes. Because you get out of the binaries, and binaries are like, you remember the computer game Pong? It was like one of the first computer games ever. The little ball is bouncing back and forth on the screen, blip, blip, and you're making the paddle go up and down. People actually spent money to do that. Can you believe that? But that's what staying within the binary is like. You're just playing Pong with the universe. And eventually somebody misses and the whole game falls apart. So, in the game of Pong, what's the reconciling force? And the answer is not Pac-Man. The answer is walking away from the console, going outside and chasing each other around the park. Now, here's another completely random seeming yet true thought. Within Zen koans, the answers are always demonstrative of the reconciling force. This is something that people don't notice about Zen koans. Does that make sense? Did that just go completely over your head? Who wants to debate Zen koans with me? Not Dave, because it made sense to him.
I think it's not just verbal reconciliation, but you have to say it with sufficient connection to it.
Yeah,
Or
sometimes you're not saying anything at all. It's like when Moomin was asked, does a dog have Buddha nature? And he took his slippers off and put them on his head and walked out of the room. Didn't require a word.
Okay, but he still walked out with sufficient conviction.
Yes. But yeah, you're correct about that part. I was just taking issue with the words part.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to say anything. You need to act with. Or my favorite Zen action, when somebody gives you the answer to a koan, hit them with a stick. The stick becomes the reconciling force. Stop laughing at me, Noor. I saw that. Okay, so thoughts, questions, answers. Talk to me, or you're going to get a commercial.
Okay, one more thought about reconciliation in the body is I think counterbalancing might be a reconciling force. Like the shoulder blade counterbalances lifting the arm.
Could be. Dave, what do you think about that? You're the body expert here.
It kind of depends what position you're in. Are you standing anatomically or crawling along, or all of those things come into it?
Hmm.
The one I like to use, because it's close to my work, is there's kind of, so you can contract and you can relax, but then there's these blended states where you're both contracting and relaxing, and they kind of uncouple different sections of the body from each other, which starts to do some very interesting things. So that's how I think about it, because it's close to what I do. But I would say I've seen a little bit of how Mushtaq uses the physical body to teach it as well, and I like the physical examples. I'm a little bit biased with that, of course, but they make very good sense, and they're good to work with. And I think as well they actually start to translate into other aspects of life too.
Yeah, of course, I'm going to agree on that part especially, because once you can put it in the physical, everything else can come from that. It's like you can't plant the seed in air, but you can plant the seed in the earth. You can plant an idea in the body. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other ideas? Nope. Okay. Commercial time. Do I have anything to sell? Let me sell you time. You can, with a little luck, not necessarily buy time, but you can certainly rent a little bit. And you can rent time either from me or from Noor, which is to say, we have our special going still. The special is pretty much ongoing because it's the way that we draw you into our web. It is our enticement into the dark side. It's how we turn you into a Sith, is that we give you this deal of getting to work with either of us for 6 hours, one-on-one, with special Sufik counseling and strangeness and solving all of your problems for half price. And our usual per hour price for working with somebody is $100 an hour. But at this time, today only, until it's tomorrow, you can have this for the small cost of 6 hours for $300, which is half price. And for some reason, people seem to like it. Go figure. It actually changes lives in interesting and fun ways. And I highly recommend it. So there is that. And I know Noor has a couple of slots open. I have a couple of slots open. And for whoever's listening to this, we would love you to take advantage of this very, very interesting, bizarre, and unusual offer. And, you know, I could go through all the sales pitches. How much would you pay for that? Would you pay $1,000? Of course you would, but it's not $1,000. I hate doing that shit. We don't want to do that. No, we just want to say, try it. You'll like it. So there's that. There is the 6 forces, or the 3 forces and 6 processes course that we did, which is now available. And later on, we will have a link to that up on the forum and in various other places. Just about everybody here has gone through that, so you already own this course. But tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell complete strangers, tell random people on the street, hey, you should do this course. Because it's interesting, it's fun, and nobody is teaching this stuff right now. Speaking of which, there is still the Ultimate Enneagram course, which is the best introduction to the Enneagram, not of personality, but of process, which is the original Enneagram. The Enneagram that has been used for over 1,000 years, probably over 2,000 years, maybe even longer than that. And you can get that at ultimateenneagram.com. And that's me and Stephen Barnes, famous author and billionaire philanthropist or whatever he's doing these days, spending 6 weeks going over the basics. He was one of my first students back in the days, and he's taken this and done amazing things with it. Steve is a best-selling author, and he has scripted a lot of his novels using the Enneagram as one of his plot devices, figuring out how the process of the story goes. And it's a unique course. There, again, you can go out and find people who will tell you what your personality is and that sort of thing. This ain't that. And then we do have the Enneagram of the Chief Feature course, which will be available sometime in the beginning of September. And that is looking at the material from which the Enneagram of personality was derived, but putting it back into its original context of being able to flow with the process of fixation of attention. And unlike the Enneagram of personality, where it says, this is your personality, you're stuck with it, we say attention does not have to be fixated. You can defixate your attention and let everything move again. So there's that. Probably either at the end of September or the beginning of October, probably towards the beginning of October, we're going to do the first of our 3-week classes. And this will be on the Enneagram of relationship. Not just romantic relationship, but all relationships. Every relationship you have fits into an Enneagram because all relationships are processes. Everybody's interested in the romantic ones because, who doesn't love romance? But let's look at how you use the Enneagram to help guide and smooth your interactions with other human beings, one-on-one and in small groups. And last but not least, the book, Discourses of Rumi, is going to be raffled off at the end of this month, which is coming up soon. And it will go to one of the people who has donated to the school. I don't care how much you donate. Donate $1, donate $1,000. You get one chance at this book. It's kind of out of print, more or less, I think. But even if you find it, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, but you will get it just for having really good luck. And we definitely would still like to have your donations to keep the school running because it pays our bills. And along with that, you will also get access to the first of the Secret Talks with Lady Noor, which will happen as soon as she gets her damn voice back. We've been waiting to do this. It's like, let's do this talk. I can't do the talk. I can't talk. And since it's Secret Talks with Lady Noor, we actually have to have her talking. Yeah, so sometime in the future we'll do Secret Talks with the funny old guy, but I think we need to do this series first because it'll be way more fun. So that's coming up. Feel free to make your donations if you'd like. There'll be links around that you can do that. The recommended donation is between $5 and $5 million. And that's pretty much it. That's all the commercials I can think of.
There's also a shop.
Oh yes, that's right, the shop. There is a shop where you can get swag, where you can get nine-sided circle t-shirts. Say that 3 times fast. and coffee cups and stickers and various other artwork. Right now, mostly by me, though I have heard rumors that much better artists may be donating something to go on things at some time in the not too distant future, which would be beyond wonderful. But we'll let you know when that happens. But we will also put up reminders. The nine-sided turtle, yes. That could actually be a mystery. The nine-sided turtle that swims through space with the Earth on its back. Yeah, we'll put up links to that as well. So you have all of these things. You can make donations. You can have T-shirts, and all of the proceeds from any of the swag that we sell just goes to the maintenance of the school, because God knows we need to be maintained somehow. So there is all of these things. And that's it. So with no further ado, I am going to stop the recording in just a second, giving everybody a chance for one last word. Time's up. Okay, we will see you next week.